the square root function y equals square root x. Now again, we have some restraints here. X cannot be negative because we can't take square root of x. We can, but it's in another division of maths. So x cannot be negative. In this case, we're not going to have an asymptote because of the following. Okay, we'll come back to that point. Just remember that. If I say y equals square root x, and I draw a graph, I said that x cannot be negative, but x can be 0. If x is 0, y is 0. When x is 1, square root of 1 is 1, so y is 1. I'm going to skip 2 because then I have to use my calculator. I'm going to go to 4. So if x is 4, y equals square root of 4 is 2. When x is 9, square root of 9 is 3. So over here. So my graph looks like that. So that is y equals square root x. Okay. Why do I not have asymptotes? When we had y equals, I'm just going to do it up here so we have space to work. When I had y equals 1 over x, what happened then was we had asymptotes on both sides, like there, and we said the value could not be 0. But it approaches that line, it approaches that asymptotes from both sides. So it was only on that value that it doesn't exist. In this case, we don't have an asymptote because from that point onwards, it doesn't exist. So the domain and range change. In this case, there were just restraints within a point. So I could approach those lines from both sides. But in this case, I can't approach a 0 from the negative side. My value starts here and it goes bigger. In this case, it could either go that way or that way. It was just on that line. It doesn't exist. And that is why there's no asymptotes here. It's just my domain and my range that changes all the time. Now, I'm going to summarize everything. I'm not going to go step by step like I've done with the others. I'm just going to have the following. I'm going to have y equals a square root x minus h. Let's make it plus h, and I'm going to have plus k. So we already know that. So the telling point in this case, the thing that moves and it's easy to draw it from, my starting point will always be this point 0, 0. Okay, because a again is going to tell me how big this thing is. So it's just going to, if that is 2, it's going to go up. If it's a half, it's going to be smaller. So that tells me the dilation. If it's negative, then it will be reflected in the x-axis because my y values change. So let's just quickly y and x. So if a is negative, okay, it's going to come down this way. So this will be y equals negative a x plus h plus k. Okay. If so that is what happens there. The k is just going to move the point up and down, and it's going to move it up and down. My h value will again go to the left and right. If h is negative, it will move in the positive direction. If h is positive, it will move in a negative direction. So this point is the one that will change, and then I'll draw my graph from there. And I will show you how to do that shortly. What I quickly want to change is there's one thing that differs here from all the others, and this is if I have a negative x, because here I'm going to have reflection in the y-axis. If I have negative x, I'm going to rewrite this. So I'm going to say when y equals a, and this is going to be x, it's going to be h minus x. So y equals h minus x. When I have h minus x, it's reflected in the y-axis plus k, which means that this thing is reflected in the y-axis. The reason for that is when I have negative x, my h value must be negative. So it's going to come into that direction. It can exist if x is negative, but then h must be greater than x, so that I still have a positive value in there, and it will move then in this direction. If that is then reflected, so if A is reflected, then I'll have it down here, which means y equals, this will be now negative A square root of h minus x plus k. So just remember, if I have then a negative x, it is reflected in the y-axis. So for the general value, this point will change, and I'm just going to redraw it and try and say what we have. We have two things, y equals, it can be over there, and that will be y equals a square root of x plus h plus k, and this point will be how much that I move, so this, the y value will be k, and my h value is how much x moved, and that will be minus h. If that's plus h, this will be minus h, and if this is negative h, then this will be positive h, as I've explained in all the other videos. The only other thing is, if it's reflected, it will be reflecting the other way. So if I have negative a, then it will go from that point reflected in the y-axis. Look at the examples to get a better understanding.